Amanda Cassatt, and this is Endgame.
The Trump military parade I had an allergic reaction to in general because of my own personal politics, but the image of Coinbase sponsoring it really just hit me in a way where an image hasn't hit me in a while. And so I did more than tweet. I wrote an op-ed about cypherpunkism. Where are we going wrong and where do we need to be course correcting ourselves?
Can you explain what it is about crypto that is antithetical to government?
I got into Ethereum because I uncovered an accounting fraud happening at the company that I was working at. And it just got covered up, swept under the rug, and I was just so pissed about it that I thought Ethereum's this great tool to eliminate corporate greed.
Perhaps Satoshi, perhaps Vitalik never imagined or believed that governments would embrace cryptocurrency.
A lot of people, I think, have a bad, like your normal sort of like Joe on the street thinking that like, oh, crypto is like used for money laundering, or at least that's how it was like years ago. Like, oh, crypto, it's so sketchy. Crypto is actually the antithesis of that. When we start using crypto as part of our normal everyday financial products and things like that, like me and myself operating a payroll company, you can see everything that happens on chain.
So here's where I want to start. There was an image that was circulating pretty widely on crypto Twitter recently of a US military parade sponsored by Coinbase. And you tweeted about that and found it to be a problem. Can you explain what you found wrong with that image?
The Trump military parade I had an allergic reaction to in general because of my own personal politics, but the image of Coinbase sponsoring it really just hit me in a way where an image hasn't hit me in a while. There was, I think, a lot of griping about seeing it. I happened to be at Protocolberg in Berlin, which has a particularly kind of anti-establishment bent among the community. There are all these people talking about it at the conference. And so I did more than tweet. I wrote an op-ed about cypherpunkism in CoinDesk and got it published pretty much like the next day, which was awesome. Just trying to call Coinbase out to say, look, you are capitalizing off of the crypto movement, and the crypto movement is antithetical to sponsoring military parades or sponsoring any government. And it really got me thinking a little bit more about what I'm doing as a startup founder in this space, why I've been working in this industry for the last almost 10 years, and kind of thinking about like, where are we going wrong and where do we need to be course correcting ourselves? And that image was just the culmination, I think, of so much that's wrong with crypto.
So here's my question. If someone's new to crypto and doesn't necessarily know a lot about the origins of the space, can you explain what it is about crypto that is antithetical to government?
Yeah, I think that some of the history of the cryptocurrency industry is important to have context for. So the Bitcoin white paper was released after the 2008 financial crisis that happened in the United States, Western kind of economies, as an alternative to banking institutions and other kinds of infrastructure that really allowed for this massive financial crime to be perpetrated against the American people. Banks that got massive bailouts, Americans who suffered from these predatory mortgage lending practices did not get a bailout. And so a lot of times I think that we forget some of that history and where Bitcoin at least originally came out of and the context that it came out of. So crypto, the early sort of like roots of it were to create a financial system that was separate from the traditional infrastructure, from big banks and government.
So the Bitcoin Genesis block had some words inscribed in it. Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. What does that phrase mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't know that. And like, I'm no like Bitcoin expert by like any means. We can expect the system to behave, or any system to behave, how it has always behaved. So what really did we learn as like a society after like the 2008 financial crisis? There's not a lot of will to, I think, change from the norm. So the economy kept moving, banks got bailed out, executives at financial institutions still got big bonuses, but people with less power, people who were not, bankers themselves really did suffer. And those consequences have existed now for 20 years or something like that. So I think that we can expect like financial institutions to behave how they always have. And that's why crypto emerging is really like an alternative to a corrupt system.
So let me steelman the opposite side. Perhaps Satoshi, perhaps Vitalik never imagined or believed that governments would embrace cryptocurrency as opposed to trying to destroy them. And that embrace has been beneficial in many ways. It's enabled all kinds of regulated products to come out in the market. Arguably, the recent wave of ETFs and now treasury products, which require some government approval, has led to massive influxes of capital into cryptocurrency and also influxes that come with that of builders trying to create things and add value even in the non-custodial real DeFi permissionless part of the space. What would you say to someone that thinks, Coinbase allying itself with the US government is perhaps a surprise to the original creators of crypto networks, but that's ultimately useful?
Well, I would say the first part of the Steelman argument is totally correct and makes sense. And overall, when we zoom out and see where the crypto industry has evolved and the different types of products that have been built on top of it, it is a net positive for society. It is also practical to think these kinds of systems have to coexist with the other kind of orchestration mechanisms that we have in society, like regulations, like government, like whatever else. Being able to have some sort of line somewhere that needs to be drawn to say, we have a limit to where this technology should go to purport or assist any kind of specific governmental initiative. One of the things that's really scary about crypto that I think lose track of because many of us are entrepreneurs, are looking to commercialize and make money off of these products. They're almost more dangerous than some financial products that exist in regulated markets because of the lack of privacy that we have at the app layer of
Explain that.
smart
Dangerous how?
contracts. It's funny, a lot of people, I think, have a bad, your normal sort of Joe on the street thinking that oh, crypto is used for money laundering, or at least that's how it was years ago. Oh, crypto, it's so sketchy. Crypto is actually
Dark web,
the
buying drugs, all that stuff.
right. Yeah, exactly. Crypto is actually the antithesis of that. It is highly traceable. You can see that it's quite transparent. You can track criminal activity a lot more effectively than you can through the financial system. Just because it's open source, you can look at a blockchain and see where money moves from A to B. When we start using crypto as part of our normal everyday financial products and things like that, like me and myself operating a payroll company, you can see everything that happens on chain, right? And think about what that looks like in the tool of somebody with a lot of power like a government. There's been a lot of kind of debates around central bank digital currencies. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think a lot of people can say, oh, it's a great thing. That's a big validation of the use of this technology to have it be used by a central bank. But, it's also terrifying. They control the money supply. They can see exactly where money goes, down the financial chain. So yeah, I mean, it's good and bad. And we I think as an industry are at a moment where we're at this period of mass adoption and really need to start having some standards more formalized for how we want this technology to be used and by who.
Take me through the nightmare scenario. I want to understand what the bad outcome is that you're trying to avoid. What's the thing that we're teetering on the brink of that could actually happen?
If we think about a state-issued cryptocurrency, we can think about people being very effectively excluded from the financial system, no way to participate in commerce, no way to get paid or participate in the labor market if you are somehow antithetical to that state, if the state views you as whatever negative thing they might. So I think that is we have the ability to exclude individuals unjustly from the financial system, and that can be
But
really negative.
arguably, right?
And
So, you know about this wave of unbanking that's been unveiled
mhm.
among
Oh, yeah.
crypto companies and crypto founders. So, even
Mhm.
outside of the crypto financial system, government has been known to use its power to unbank people, crypto founders, anyone that it doesn't want to have a bank account for whatever reason. And there are people that work in various industries that have been unbanked. The sex work industry gets unbanked all the time. Crypto founders get
Mhm.
unbanked. There are other kinds of people that may find themselves accidentally unbanked. Seems like they can do this with normal currency. How does crypto accelerate this?
Yeah, I mean, like that is 100% true. And I have personally seen, I have professionally seen a lot of real world instances of this actually happening in the crypto industry. Another one industry that you didn't mention, but is like very popularly unbanked is the cannabis industry.
That's another
Still
great example.
100% cash based. Yeah, basically, like crypto is at like a fundamental level. Like crypto is just like a much more efficient system for money movement, and if somebody controls that money movement system, they can be much more effective at excluding people from the financial system. So, cannabis companies, sex workers, like they use cash. They use to some extent like these like money movement apps like Venmo or PayPal, and just call their activities by a different name in hopes that like some regulator is not going to see it. One very interesting or funny example of this is Matt Gaetz, a senator from Florida who was interacting with sex workers who called his Venmo transactions something by a different name. There are still like abilities to operate outside of the normal financial system for companies that are totally legal. One thing that we have done actually at my startup is we've created an entirely bankless solution. So you can run a tax compliant, labor compliant payroll run and never touch banking rails if you don't want to. And that's really a response to, our customers getting thrown out of the banking system with like no recourse, no reason why. And, they have to make payroll. So yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Just to tie this back to Coinbase for a moment. So, just to put the
Mhm.
pieces together here. So, Coinbase advertising with the US military in this parade signifies, and correct me where I get this wrong, signifies that some of the biggest cryptocurrency companies are not only willing to, but excited to bend the knee to governments that have shown themselves willing to use financial access as a political tool. And that if they subject crypto based systems to that same set of incentives, that this one outlet that we've had for circumventing government coercion, that is crypto, might be lost. Is that the concern?
Yeah, I think that's like perfectly well said. Coinbase sponsoring the government military parade is a particularly like insidious case. I think of the violation of privacy and cypherpunk values, but they're not exactly a unicorn. There are so many instances of big corporations bending the knee to basically like appease the jurisdictions that they operate in. It came out maybe 10 years later, but like the CIA paying AT&T for phone records, right? This is like actually part of their business model and is legal because of the Patriot Act that, came about in post 9/11 world, right? There are a lot of examples of this. Coinbase is a company that operates in crypto should be held to a higher standard because they are the ones profiting off of these kinds of values and that kind of technology.
And so, do you think there's a difference between how a public traditional company like Coinbase should act versus a company that really exists primarily on chain? I mean, I ask because Coinbase at the core is, I think most of its revenue comes from running a traditional exchange that gives you
Mhm.
exposure to crypto upside, but that isn't a crypto company, as in it is custodial, it is permissioned, it is KYC'd. And so I wonder, are there different standards that you would apply to something like Coinbase, something like Circle, as opposed to, I don't know, something like Aave that's completely
Mhm.
DeFi native?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I think like my first reaction as kind of like a stodgy accountant who cares about following the rules that are required are like, yeah, public companies are held to a different kind of standard than private companies are for a lot of good reasons, right? They give exposure to retail investors, to their cash flows. So that comes with certain protections and that is good. I think that for companies that operate in the crypto sphere, whether you're selling access to decentralized products or assets, or whether you yourself are totally decentralized, should be held to like very similar values. It also is interesting because it needs to, I think it is like forcing a conversation about how do we retrofit some of like this advanced technology, next generation of like financial wealth into the current like standards, and how do we think about the current standards needing to change as well. So KYC, KYB is a great example of this. Where do we have to have an entirely opt-in system where every service that you sign up for needs a copy of your ID, needs a copy of your address? Or should we be thinking about having a more out kind of KYC and compliance system, where unless you have some reason, some pattern of behavior or some, suspicious red flag in your activity, then you need to like share more information about yourself. But the default being you need to opt in and share all of your personal information, I think we see like in many different instances outside of the crypto industry, is just like a system that is failing. My first job ever was at the State Department, right? My personal information has been, exposed from the State Department hack back in 2012, I think it was. There are a lot of instances of this. Like, I'm sure that most people have gotten, at least in the US, have gotten a notice saying, hey, your information was compromised in some hack. Here, you can sign up for an Equifax tracking email notification if it's ever accessed. Like, that's messed up, and it's something that crypto forces the conversation to kind of reevaluate how do we think about managing these kinds of standards and achieving the same outcome. Nobody wants to go out there and like fund terrorism unless you yourself are a terrorist, and that's not the majority of people. But we have the burden of like needing to prove ourselves again and again, and it's just like totally unnecessary.
Okay, here's my wacky proposal. What if we just completely got
Yeah.
rid of anti-money laundering laws and we just stop making money laundering illegal? We completely give up any kind of KYC. And if someone commits a crime, then you pursue them for that crime. You use the police, you use the CIA, the FBI to punish them, but you don't punish the financial transaction side. Don't you think if somehow we could get something like that through, we could make the entire system so much more efficient, or is that completely crazy?
I mean, it is crazy, but I don't think it's like something that should be like, thrown away just on face value of it sounding crazy. I think that there's some level of like, yeah, financial protections need to exist. The technology layer it's, I think to your point, but correct me if I'm wrong, is not the area to be like honing in on as like the throat to choke or something like that. Like we have seen a number of cases in recent years, one very, currently around software developers who build decentralized technologies being convicted or accused of financial crimes. Like it's crazy. We see it in TradFi. There was a Goldman Sachs analyst who copied some code and went to jail for a number of years for, taking away the code that he created at that financial institution. I think that, so there's some level of like, what is the most effective way to enforce and get to the outcomes that we want? Like, is it at the technology level? Probably not, right? It doesn't really make logical sense when you zoom out and look at it. But I think that there's another level here of conspiracy hat kind of like putting on. But like, financial institutions are held to a totally different standard than, other kinds of fintech or operators of fintech like people. HSBC is like the most effective money mover of cartel funds in the world. Citibank came out today as they had a wealth management group that was managing funds for Russian oligarchs in violation of US sanctions. Like, what's going to happen to them? Like, they're going to get a fine from the government. Nothing's going to happen.
And it's
like,
the cost
maybe
of
they
doing
have to hire a
business.
few
They've
more
already
people.
factored that in.
Yeah. And I think that some of what we should think about with crypto technology is less the like negative edges of society, money launderers, terrorists kind of thing. And the actual core infrastructure is corrupt, and like that needs to change. And just like personally for myself, I'm sure I've told you this story multiple times, but I got into Ethereum because I uncovered an accounting fraud happening at the company that I was working at. And it just got covered up, swept under the rug. And I was just so pissed about it that I thought Ethereum's this great tool to eliminate corporate greed. And when I saw this Coinbase like military ad, I was like, we need to take a step back and rethink about like what is happening in this industry, because it's not worth it if we're just replicating the same kind of financial infrastructure, political like partisanship kind of thing,
So let's do that. Let's rethink. This is standards for how cryptocurrency companies should act according to Megan. What are those standards? Are they laws? Are they community standards? Are they expressed through consumer preference? Are they expressed top down in the form of regulations? What would you put in place?
I think that if I was redesigning how we should transact with one another from the ground up, I would look at the Cypherpunk manifesto that was written in 1993. We would really have a privacy first approach where we have a cultural shift around how we think about communicating, transacting at a fundamental level. Like we should be default private for everything. And that's just normal. Like the use of encrypted technologies like across the board, right? Whether it's signal messaging, whether it's using, self-custodying your own assets, I think having a privacy first approach is the like fundamental thing that really has the most impact when we think about like downstream ramifications of like how we transact with one another, how we work together, how we work with our companies. And so I think that that would probably have the biggest impact. There's like a
Well,
very
obviously, the incentives
fundamental
aren't
issue
aligned
there.
to make that happen.
What incentives do you think would need to change?
Well, here's what I think the government's incentive is. It's as much
Mm,
financial control as possible over its population. And that means as much
mhm,
transparency as possible, as much actual literal direct control as people are willing to stomach.
mhm,
And so there seems like there's very little political will to flip the entire system to be private by default. So I guess my question is, in an environment where there's not top-down political will to make a drastic change
mhm.
like that, what can people that are involved in the Ethereum community or that are in crypto or that believe in the pillars of the Cypherpunk manifesto, what can people do to try to move the system in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think like any great societal change, it, requires a revolution, which requires people to be organized and have a cohesive message. There are ways that you can incorporate, I would say, some like cypherpunk activities into your daily life. Like, I think the easiest thing is thinking about like how you communicate with people and making it more normal to use encrypted kind of like chat apps, right? If we're talking about a generational shift, like what can we get everybody to just do that's like slightly different, right? Like use Signal instead of iMessage. That could be a cool one. There's a lot that the crypto like infrastructure community is working on that still like hasn't really rippled out yet to like your average end user, retail trader or transactor that we are so close to having, right? Where you can have fully on-chain private transactions, where you can have like a fully custodial, meaning self-custodial, like asset experience without all of the overhead of like negative UX and things like that. So, we're not like there yet, I think, from a tech perspective, but I feel like we need to be preparing ourselves to get there, at least mentally. And there are other things that we can use outside of pure crypto currency technology that are private and encrypted.
Well, I completely understand. And obviously, it resonates with me the idea that government visibility into all financial transactions, let alone government control over financial transactions, is a very slippery slide into authoritarianism and more control by
Mhm.
government over people's daily lives. And even if you like the administration now, or even if you liked the last administration, there might be some administration in the future that you don't like that inherits the benefit of that level of control in order to lock you out, lock out the people that you care about, and make life worse. So I can definitely see that. My question is, with the increasing institutionalization of our space, with the increasing involvement of more regulated capital markets actors, do you think that that shift in terms of where the capital in crypto is coming from, who the players are in crypto, do you think that shift is making it harder for crypto to achieve its cypherpunk goals? Or do you think that the capital and interest and builder excitement that that's helping to bring into our space is actually accelerating and enabling the adoption of those privacy preserving tools?
Yeah, I think it is a blessing and a curse. So having these large financial institutions start playing around and doing some like testing with different kinds of financial products, I think is a net positive for the industry, right? They have massive distribution channels. I think it really depends on the kinds of products that they build. So the crypto ETFs that have come out, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's interesting. Like it brings more capital into the crypto markets, which is, I think, a net benefit from for the market and for people working in the crypto industry, who are interacting with the crypto industry. Is it that interesting from a financial services perspective? Like, not really. Like having ETFs built on a smart contract, like that would be really innovative. I think that we shouldn't poo-poo it though, because, these big financial institutions have a lot of people that work for them that are genuinely interested in learning and leveraging this technology to make things better. So I think that there's some level of that. There is like interest. Interest is good it is up to people who, are working at those institutions or advising those institutions or investing in those institutions to try to manage the outcomes that are coming out of them. Robinhood had a very interesting announcement around tokenizing stocks. Like, this is an exciting experiment. There are a lot of kinds of financial products in like the rest of the TradFi market that look a lot like this. Like American depository receipts are what I think of. It's basically a private tokenized version of a stock underwritten by a bank, right? These tokenized stocks are now issued by Robinhood. It's a start. It's a start towards, these institutions building some muscle memory around how to use this technology and, testing the market, things like that. So I think that's good. If we think about like the financial incentive of the crypto industry, it is a very tough question. And I think there's not like a cohesive answer to it. So many people building in the crypto industry, myself included, are like funded by venture capital firms who I think do have good intentions about like where they want to see this technology go, but also need a financial return. And so it's very attractive for entrepreneurs to sell their businesses to these big fintechs. They get their investors a return, they get the label of being a successful founder with however many exits, but like, what is your technology really doing? I think that that's something that also has to be at the mind of people building this technology. Like, you have an obligation to return money to your investors. You also have an obligation to the technology community to like do good and to not recreate the same kind of problems that our society has had for a number of years.
Maybe you can lay out for us kind of crisply exactly like what are these cypherpunk values? Going back to the manifesto or whatever you consider the important cypherpunk values and how you're building in order to try to promote.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, like the cypherpunk movement was created by technologists, so people who write code. And the early days, as I understand it, of cypherpunkism was around making sure that the code that you're writing is encrypted, proponing the research and development of cryptographical systems, crypto technology, crypto in the old sense of the word crypto. So I think that that's where it started. This happening right around the mass adoption of the internet. So things like web traffic, things like email, like were not private by default. And so the people who were building these early systems saw this as a need and, created a standard, a culture, a community around being a cypherpunk. I think that now, like, the internet's been in use for much longer. There's so much data sitting on it. Our financial system runs on it, right? Like, we are more interconnected with people living in other countries and societies now than we ever were. And the cypherpunk definition needs to expand. And I think that there's like, some people might like have a little bit of an aversion to it just because it sounds like something weird or they don't really understand it. But anybody who interacts with technology or anybody that interacts with financial services or anybody building around those kinds of products should be thinking like, how can we build these products so that they foster a private transaction, privacy in general? How do we protect our users? So, like I am an accountant, technically, right? Like I have spent like a lot of my professional career like creating reports and filing them with the government, right? There's some level of like, we give to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? Like there is some level of transparency that these kinds of regulatory bodies should have to be able to protect consumers. Do we have to be giving away everything? I think the answer is certainly not. How I think about it for myself, like I don't write code. I think that like there are a lot of ways you can apply cypherpunk values in your own sort of like professional career, right? We think about it like, how do we just ensure that we, for the users of our software, like how are we protecting their data? How do we put guardrails into our product to ensure that like they're never sharing more than they need to, while also making sure that they are sticking above board to all the rules and regulations that they have to abide by.
Let's talk about privacy and the state of privacy technology. Maybe you can tell us, in your words, in your mind, what's been happening lately with the Tornado Cash case, what you think of Tornado Cash. Is that an ideal manifestation of privacy technology?
Yeah, the Tornado Cash case is very interesting. There are like multiple cases, I think,
And maybe you can just
ongoing.
maybe you can explain it in your words, kind of what Tornado Cash is, what's the state of the case, what you think of it.
So there are three core developers of the Tornado Cash protocol. All of them are dealing with legal cases in different jurisdictions. In my hometown of New York City, the case against Roman Storm concluded, or the first part of the case concluded last week, where the government charged him with a couple of different charges. He was found guilty on one of them, which was conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money services business.
Uh-huh.
It's insane. He's a software developer. He wrote some code that people can use to transfer value on a blockchain. The fact that he is, operating a money services business is so far off base. And I think if we fast forward a year after an appeals process and everything, I would think that he would be vindicated. And that's my prediction would be he's going to get off because it's such a ridiculous charge. And it actually goes against the guidance that we've received from FinCEN around money services businesses and how they should be operating and how they should be licensed. I think that Tornado Cash is an interesting instance of privacy technology. I'm certainly no expert. My understanding of it is that it's a mixer. So you are pooling together funds from different funders. Basically, the exit ramps are where it operates kind of similarly to Tor, as far as I understand it, like the darknet or decentralized internet, where the exit ramps are where you can't, or a lot of the transaction information is obscured. Are mixers a fundamental privacy technology? Are they a good kind of privacy technology? I think is actually kind of debatable. There are a lot of instances where you wouldn't want your funds commingled with others, even just for the sake of being able to obscure some of the information contained within the pool, contained within the transaction. There are privacy technologies that are privacy fundamentally, they are private from the ground up, and they've been under development for a long time. So some examples are Ernst & Young actually building a private network.
Not what you would expect,
There's
right? You would
not what
expect this
you
to come from some developer in a basement, not from one of the big accounting firms.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's interesting, they're building it in response to what they see as a need from corporations. The protocol is called Nightfall. They have another protocol that does privacy from the ground up for smart contract interactions, which is something that I'm really interested in. I believe it's called Starlight. They're pretty nascent. Nobody's using them, so it's hard to validate whether this is the right solution. We have L1 networks like Aztec that have been under development for a very long time. And
What
really,
do you think of
when you think
Aztec?
about I would love to use it. I would love to use it. It's not quite there. I think looking as somebody who is a commercializer of this technology, right? We build apps on top of these kinds of networks. It's very hard to commercialize some of the stuff around Aztec network, partially because it's semi-launched or not fully launched yet. It doesn't have a lot of the kind of developer tooling that you would expect as an app developer. The biggest issue that I've seen with it is that it doesn't connect into on and off ramps to the traditional financial system. When it comes down to it, people need to pay bills, pay their rent. They normally have to
That's
do
the
that through a
chokehold,
bank
right?
transfer.
That's the choke point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think it's early days still of this privacy technology. And if I could I wish if I could manage the world, which I can't, the privacy tech, we would be 10 years ahead on the privacy tech, and we would be 3 years behind on the retail adoption of crypto, because there's some weird choke point that we're getting to where you have a lot of people interacting with crypto assets and it's not private. And where is the disconnect? What ramifications could be happening from retail users who don't really understand that everything that they're doing is transparent? Yeah, I think that's probably what I would change. Super bullish on privacy tech. Would love to see more of it. We're very close to the point of having app developers be able to really use it. So we'll
Do
see.
you think that something like the Tornado Cash conviction is going to have a chilling effect?
It's interesting. I think that it has really galvanized the crypto community, similar to how, when Virgil Griffith, who is a Ethereum Foundation researcher, was convicted of evading sanctions when he gave a lecture in North Korea about blockchain technology, galvanized the crypto industry. If I were a software engineer, I would be nervous. I would personally be nervous if I was the one writing code that dealt with privacy preserving technologies. I would have a good lawyer on retainer. It's almost like a banner, a lot of the industry can rally around. But at the individual level, I definitely think that it gives people pause. And what kind of effect, what kind of talent are we missing out on that might not want to risk it personally for the sake of this tech is I think something we won't really know.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of both happening, right? We had the Silk Road founder get released early from prison, but we also
Mhm.
saw this Roman storm conviction that hopefully is going to get overturned on appeals. It's been great to see the Ethereum Foundation really step forward on this with big
Mhm.
legal defense contributions and with a big matching fund. So that's been really cool to see. And I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't have that chilling effect. I mean, I'm a proud Tornado Cash user from back in the day. Not that I was doing anything illegal, but merely in order to disguise transactions that I didn't wish to be public. And
Mhm.
Vitalik has said he's done the same. So many people in the space have been users of mixers for all kinds of normal privacy reasons without actually doing anything illicit. So I think like that this privacy is normal, code is free speech tagline actually goes a pretty long way. And the more that normal people use privacy tools for legal activity that they merely wish to keep private, the more cover that offers for those technologies to exist.
Yeah, 100%. It is also interesting thinking about the users of these technologies, where a bunch of users of Tornado Cash did file a countersuit against whatever government entity issued sanctions against
Mm.
Tornado Cash associated wallets and was very effective in actually removing those sanctions. So it's the interesting thing about the technology. Like the developers, the users, like we are all like connected and in it together. And so good for those outspoken users who really cared about the technology and got a win for that legally.
Well, let's talk about stablecoins because you, with Frank,
Mhm.
starting with payroll, are building in this stablecoin space. And I want to hear you explain what Franklin does and where you are in your building journey. But also, it increasingly seems like stablecoins are where crypto is finding product market fit in 2025 into 2026. And I hear more about stablecoins when it comes to big capital flows, when it comes to institutions, then I hear about kind of cypherpunk crypto or crypto
Mhm.
that someone would keep on their own hard wallet in cold storage, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that the move toward stablecoin finance is accelerating the expression of crypto's original cypherpunk values, or do you think it's almost taking us in the opposite direction?
There are a lot of people, I think, who have been working the crypto atmosphere for a while and look at stablecoins kind of with disgust because it is fundamentally like, a US dollar, right? And it's just a more technically smart, programmable US dollar.
Yeah,
And I think that, like,
the idea that blockchains would just be like a transport layer for the US dollar, I think
mhm.
really boggles the minds of some early crypto people.
You can debate like what is fundamentally valuable, right? Like, is a US dollar valuable? Like, where do we want to be pegging value to, right? Like, stable coins, US dollar stable coins primarily do have product market fit, right? Because we figured out a way to create like the licensing structure, the money movement mechanisms, the audit requirements to have this basically just be a very like efficient orchestration layer of the US dollar. So, I empathize with some of the complaints around that and certainly worth a conversation worth having. The thing that, has yet to be determined about stablecoins is like, is it a technology for people to really transact in a peer to peer fashion, or is it going to be just co opted by fintech? So, one thing that we do at my company, which is a payroll company, is we have created payroll smart contracts for our users. The companies that use us are interacting in a peer to peer manner with their workers. We're just creating, calculating taxes for them, reporting it, right? Where, the money movement is peer to peer. And that was very important to us from the beginning. A lot of people in this industry look at things like the Stripe acquisition of Bridge for $1 billion,
Mhm.
like some of the other like big acquisitions and see it as validating for the industry as a whole. If you look currently, at least at the Stripe stablecoin product, it's really expensive to use. It's really, really, really pricey. And so,
Mhm.
like, is it something that's just going to add to Stripe's bottom line, or is it something that is going to have a benefit for users all the way down the value chain? Is something that I think we really need to be thinking about. Are we eliminating middlemen? Are we making it easier to transact? Right? Like, I don't think so yet. And it's something I think for all the builders in the stablecoin space to really keep in mind. Like, why are stablecoins interesting at all? It's not to make a bank's back office more efficient, it's to enable peer to peer transactions.
Well, maybe this is an overly rosy way to push back on it, but isn't it
Mm.
arguably a move in the right direction from a cypherpunk values perspective to simply move finance from centralized ledgers that are owned by various companies to a transparent ledger, even if the coins that are moving over them are at the end of the day under centralized control. Isn't that a step in the right direction?
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of layers to it. I think that generally companies moving on chain is better. It's just, are you repackaging and then selling that product at a premium as opposed to just using it for yourself is like maybe where I would draw the distinction there. I like there's, different layers. Like if you can move some of your back office finances on chain and you're self-custodying them and you have less of a reliance on banking infrastructure, you have less of a reliance on, like these big, heavy kind of like compliance infrastructures that go along with interacting with banks. Like that could be a net positive. I think everything is a spectrum. You don't have to be running a business that's 100% cypherpunk, right? If we can just get more companies, more people to like be on the cypherpunk spectrum, like that is a big win.
So I think a lot of builders, a lot of investors have specific values or specific outcomes they would like to be part of making manifest in the world and act to
Mhm.
some degree according to that paradigm, that template. But there's also a lot investors, builders that whose mentality is skating toward where the puck is going. We want to build, we want to invest in the thing that's going to win. And I hear a lot
Mhm.
that the house always wins, right?
Mhm.
Authoritarianism, centralized control, top-down systems, those are the ones that seem to win. Privacy, I don't know, looks like it might not win. Maybe that's not the arena where I should build or where I should invest. What would you say to builders or investors that are skeptical about the future of building technology that accelerates adoption of cypherpunk values or that's inextricable from that narrative, as opposed to building something anticipating a future with less privacy and more control that seems to be creeping up on us?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the good things about investors like VCs or retail investors or what have you, anybody kind of allocating capital is that their incentive is clear, right? They want a return. I am a business school dropout. Basically, the first like semesters of an MBA program are all about how do you return shareholder value, right? So it's clear what you sign up for when you take outside capital, and you have an obligation to fulfill those requirements, right?
Mhm.
And ultimately, like, capitalism, I would say, is a good system. It has worked. It has created a lot of wealth. And, when you enter into that system, the goal is to make everybody around you like get a return. So you can have a lot of goals for what you do when you start up a company or when you start building software. They don't have to be diametrically opposed. If you're just out there to like make a quick buck, like there are a lot of people like that in crypto who, start up, cash out, like
Increasingly, it
the South
seems.
Park. Yeah. And so, that's fine. And I think that, if there's like justice or karma, like those people get weeded out eventually, hopefully, at least I would hope so. I don't think that anybody starts a company that's like super successful. That's just like, let's return shareholder value. You're doing it because you have a problem that you want to solve that gets you out of bed every single day, that you want to make life better for other people in whatever niche of the world that you're operating in and be able to commercialize that. And so I think like they can be all along the same path, right? Whether you're in the game and you feel like you're losing, like if we're losing the privacy race, it doesn't mean that you should quit just because you feel like you're behind, Like everybody loves an underdog story. The universe has a bend towards justice in the end. So, keep on keeping on. It's very hard. Like I think when you look at things, it's so timescale dependent, right? Like the people that were building the early internet probably didn't really have an idea of how it would change the world. People who are building privacy technology now, yeah, like maybe we don't have mass adoption of it, but you never know what it's going to do for like our kids or grandkids' generations. So, I think the value accruals accrue over different time periods and they're still valuable.
And so the creators of the internet created the internet
Mm.
originally with a lot of these values in mind and at heart. But ultimately,
Yeah.
they built technology that's not inextricable from its narrative. And arguably, because of the lack of an inbuilt payments layer, that created the
Hmm.
opening for this incentive system built around attention, this co opting of our attention, of our internet, what Cory Doctorow would call enshittification. What kinds of guardrails are we in the crypto industry putting in place, or should we put in place, in order to learn from the internet creators that came before us and avoid this outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think I worked like way back in the day with this guy who was an IT manager for a law firm. And he said something to me once that has like just it resonates with me like all the time, which is that technology is people. Every human created system ultimately comes down to the people who are operating it. And so I think that when we have people that enter this industry that are exploitative and corrupt, that's what the technology reflects. Like Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, like this is a great example. Somebody who comes in is a leader, lots of followers, right? Getting, lots of sort of meetings with Congress, with different governments around the world, was ended up being a bad actor, right? And there were signs of that happening that are certainly like our regulatory infrastructure missed, that like retail users missed. When we have people who are out there like fighting for privacy. I think the SEAL organization, which are a group of white hat hackers that get in deep in like the kind of like the underbelly of crypto where some of like the worst outcomes happen and try to fix it and try to make it better. Like those are the kinds of people that we should be sort of like elevating as a culture, as a industry and as organizations. Yeah, that's what I would say is probably, it's like less of a technical thing, technical solution, but I think is true. Like who do we admire? Who do we fund? Who do we have as users? Like that kind of thing I think is important.
So it comes down to the people there for you.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a great point to end on, unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, thanks for the conversation,
Cool, let's do
Amanda.
it. Perfect. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. This was a cool one.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Endgame. Please follow me on X, Amanda Cassatt, 2 S's, 2 T's. Follow the company I founded, Serotonin HQ, and listen wherever you get your podcasts: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the works.